What's going on, everyone? Got my coworker and friend Alex.
How's it going?
And his fiance Makayla here. And they're here to learn to work with venomous snakes. So let's get to it. Now it's Alex's turn to work with the hognoses. If you watched the video with Makayla, his fiance, we went over working with the hognose snakes and the Nelson's milk snake. And we're going over using 1 hook, 2 hooks, and tailing. And Alex has experience, so this isn't going to be as long as with Makayla, and we'll just get right to it.
Let's do it.
So Alex already knows about the balance points, about non-repetitive touch, if possible. If things always happen, you might have to re-hook and do things. And he knows how to use 2 hooks, all that stuff. So you're going to go ahead and do the 1 hook.
Pretty simple stuff. It's like first stuff you ever taught me.
Mm-hmm. Say that again, but louder.
So one of the first things Mark ever told me was to find the balancing point. Everything I know came from my coworker Mark. Once you get it down, pretty easy to do. Like he said, you just find the balance point. Once you feel it, you let the snake go. Pretty basic.
Now, if you didn't watch the video with Makayla, I mentioned that I prefer, when practicing with non-venomous and snakes that are harmless to people, I prefer king snakes or more wiggly snakes, because that's the best practice, is ones that are going to make it worst case scenario. But Alex has had experience with longer king snakes. We've went over that with bigger king snakes and all of that. And the best, in my opinion, especially if you want to work with cobras, black races.
Yep.
They're typically very defensive.
Very. Even the black rat snake that I own is very defensive, and that's the one I practice with the most.
Yeah.
It's pretty big, pretty decent size to practice with as well. With most of the cobras out there that are that size.
So the only difference with that is the arboreal nature.
Yeah.
So it's going to do different behaviors, but it's
fun
still
to
good practice.
Yes.
So for using 2 hooks, what I like to do, even though Alex already knows this, if you don't watch other video, you're not going to know my explanation, is putting 1 hook further up, 1 not all the way back, but just even. And another thing that I didn't mention when going over with Makayla is the hooks, being aware of how the hooks are. Holding it up like this is going to cause a problem if it falls off, slides down. One of my friends is bitten like that. So to be aware of holding it even with the ground. So I'll say redo that completely.
Yeah. A little difficult when I curled up. But
Good job.
it's pretty much just finding 2 balance points, if I'm not mistaken. Correct.
And the only difference would be if some snakes don't stay on the hook with 1 hook or 2 hooks. And in that situation, you got to be just right in being able to get it to where you want it to go, and before it falls off.
Alright. Like you said, it's pretty. If you don't know what you're doing, I mean, it's not self-explanatory, but you hold something up, gravity's going to kick in, and it's going to slide back. Like you said, though, depending on what species it is, if it likes the hook or not. You know? Now, this is one of the safer ways to deal with most of the more defensive elapids, if I'm not mistaken, is using 2 hooks. I could be mistaken wrong.
So with that, what you were just saying is to make sure to stay focused on the snake. If this is a venomous snake looking at me, especially a cobra that's...
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, with defensive cobras, elapids, 2 hooks. But you know, it's all situational. A mamba, for instance, using 2 hooks you might have to drop the hook.
Yeah.
You might have to drop the snake if it's climbing up.
Yep.
Ready to move on to hooking and tailing?
Oh yeah. All right.
So the reason this water bottle's here is the technique I like to do, which you already know, is with a new snake, a wild one, captive one, I like to put a barrier between so that if there's a reaction from that initial touch, there's something there. So let me just show you, since I was talking to you during that, I'd put part over and I'd wait. And then slightly adjust, and if you notice I'm not grabbing, grabbing can also cause a reaction. And if it does turn around, letting go. Another thing is to be aware of what's going on up here instead of focusing on, is it the right time? It all has to happen together.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Knowing where everything is at this, knowing when to grab, knowing what's going on up front, all of that. If you think Alex did a good job, click dislike. Good job, man. Good job.
Thank you.
You ready to move on to the Nelson's milk snake?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right.
What's that count?
So with this Nelson's milk snakes are great too. It's at the size where we're just going to be using 1 hook. We might as well do 2 hooks.
Yeah.
And actually, since you have experience with the snake, we'll do the tailing too. Just because sometimes it does panic, and it's good practice not getting bit or not letting the head touch your body. So avoiding all of that. So with 1 hook, we take it out first. It's a beautiful snake, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, this one's in shed, but
It's in shed and still gorgeous.
yeah.
Just like the Hognose snakes. And he's defensive right now, as you can see with just his.
Oh, yeah.
And this one does typically resort to fleeing instead of being defensive in the biting aspect. But yeah, we're going to start with the 1 hook, doing the balance point. And you see this, situations like that happen. With copperheads, for instance, they're not the best at riding the hook. Sometimes they're hanging on right at the tail, and you have to get it into the container. Now, if this is a venomous snake, I wouldn't let it get like that.
No.
I would have moved back, but not overreacting, like, and causing it to panic. So lifting right here, and look at this. Usually they'll stop if they're good. Sometimes it'll keep going, which is good practice. If it does do that, that's good. So you can practice. So this is a good situation for practicing if it does fall off the hook, because like I said, a lot of copperheads in my experience do this. They'll keep falling off. And if you reach and grab, which is sometimes your instinct, it's going to cause it to flip around. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You
I've
dig?
I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
With my king snake that I practice with, he does it all the time.
Good job. So in these situations, again, like you're doing, you have to adjust, putting up further instead of starting at where you think the balance point is.
Yep. And kind of have to feel it as they're riding on the hook like that. Like for me, if I feel like a heavy point, like even the slightest of heavy points, I start lifting. Because that to me feels like a balance point. Like right here.
And let's say this is, well, I'll just give you an example. With the snouted cobra that I have that's defensive, when it was a baby, it would panic and go really quick. And I would set up a container below its enclosure, let's say I'm cleaning it, and I have it ready so if it falls off, at least it's still contained. because one time it did fall on the ground and I did reach and grab. Luckily that time it didn't overreact, but it could have. And that's when I realized I need to start, having things in place that would stop stupidity from happening.
No.
Because sometimes, like I said, your instinct sometimes to grab, and that can cause problems.
I remember having that problem when first starting out. Let's say if he were to bolt off, I always had that grabbing response, like oh crap, I need to grab him so he doesn't go in that spot. But now I'm having more experience with it. The hook is the way to go with control. You don't always want to grab it because, like you said, a grab can cause him to panic even more, which can lead to a bite. So I've been a lot safer on that end. That's what I've been working on mostly with the king snake, even the black rat snake I had.
You're talking about like as if it was venomous?
Yep.
So like we do here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I can't have a venomous snake where I live, so I go to the next best thing, and that's practicing with non-venomous snakes, as all people getting into the snake hobby should do. Don't start off with something venomous, not knowing what to do.
And then what, if you want to, what's the best thing to do?
Start off with non-venomous.
No, I'm saying the next thing. If you want to start working with venomous and you've worked with non-venomous.
Oh, you want to get somebody that knows what they're doing with venomous and ask them for help. That's what I did with marketing.
It's pretty cool that you have the best snake handler on earth teaching you.
Oh yeah, it's the best thing ever. It's the best feeling ever.
Alright, we'll move on to 2 hooks. You want to do that?
Yeah.
So again, like with the Hognose, but this one is going to be a little better for practicing. The reason I started with the Hognose is clearly because it's simpler.
So much more.
But again, like this is perfect to show you there's cane breaks at our work that overreact, and I use 2 hooks every time, and this is what happens. Of course, when I say this is what happens, it stops, but it'll fall off, and then I have to keep adjusting. So if it falls on the ground, I have to do it again, but it all has to be fluid, so I have to adjust and get it close at the right time, that when it falls off, at least it's in the enclosure.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's different when you're at a job compared to your stuff. So when the snake falls on the ground, I'm going to overreact, not in a way that I'm going to get bit, but panic more because this isn't my snake.
Yep.
I don't want it to get under something.
Under something,
Yeah. So again, like with the Hognose snake, the placement, but with this one you're going to have to do it quicker, getting it off the ground at the right time, but not too high up so that if it does fall.
Yeah.
So let's move on to tailing. Alright, so for tailing, as you know, again, we're going to be placing, this is what I was looking for originally with the Hognose snake, but I didn't bring one in for the Hognose snake, is I like to use container since there's a little deeper. But again, the initial grab and readjusting, but you notice I'm readjusting before its head is up over.
So that way
Because if I'm up like this, then if it wants to flail around, it's going to be difficult. And another thing is, not moving it around all the time like this and looking. The eye contact can cause a defensive reaction. The moving around can cause it to be more flighty, but staying still can cause it to stop. But let's say it was doing what it was doing and I wasn't being goofy, that readjusting, this is why it's good practice, readjusting so it doesn't climb back on its body, but if it gets to a certain point you're going to have to let go. Yep. So go ahead and try. Try again. do it again, but put the hook up a little further. Yeah. So I would now do it right here. Now lift up, wait. Now you can gently, now readjust the hook. Good job, Alex. Proud of you. Well, good job. Next up, we're going to teach Makayla and Alex with vipers. So subscribe so you can check that out as well. Take care, everyone.